The study of biology of developmental psychology is important as it bridges the intricate relationship between biological processes and psychological development across lifespan. So it provides comprehensive understanding of how genetics, brain development, hormones, and environmental factors shape an individual's cognitive, emotional, and behavioral growth. Let us discuss some of the factors we consider in the foundation of development. First is the genes and transmission of traits. So genes are the fundamental units of heredity containing the instructions encoded in our DNA that determine an individual's traits. For example, genes dictate whether someone will have blue or brown eyes, curly or straight hair, and other physical characteristics. Next is transmission of genes. So this is the process of passing genes from one generation to next through reproductive cells. So when an egg from mother and a sperm from father unite during fertilization, they combine their genetic material, creating unique genetic code for the developing individual. Next is the patterns of genetic inheritance, homozygous and heterozygous. Homozygous refers to having two identical alleles for a particular trait, while heterozygous meaning having two different alleles. So the interaction between these alleles determines the individual's observable traits or phenotype. Next is dominant recessive inheritance. So this is a pattern of genetic inheritance where one allele or the dominant one masks the expression of the other allele or the recessive one. For example, if an individual inherits one dominant allele for brown eyes and one recessive allele for blue eyes, their eyes will be brown. Next is the incomplete dominance. So think about human hair color. So let's say a person with jet black hair has a child with someone who has bright blonde hair. So according to incomplete dominance, the child might have light brown hair. So instead of inheriting the black or blonde hair color, in this case, both the black and blonde alleles contribute to the child's hair color, resulting in a unique shade of brown. Next is the chromosomal abnormalities in psychology or a continuation no a continuation of patterns of genetic inheritance, the X-linked inheritance. So consider a family with a history of specific mental health condition like color blindness, so which is linked recessive disorder. If a mother carries one normal X allele and one X-linked allele for color blindness, she is a carrier but does not experience the condition herself. So if she has a son, he has a 50% chance of inheriting the X-linked allele for color blindness from her. So since males have only one X chromosome, if they inherit the X-linked allele for the condition, they may be at risk of developing color blindness, highlighting how genetics can influence the predisposition to certain psychological traits or disorder, even if the mother does not carry um, it at that time. Imagine a gene associated with a higher risk of anxiety disorders that exhibits genomic imprinting. If a child inherits a normal allele for this gene from their mother and methylated allele for the same gene from their father, the methylated allele may be silenced due to genomic imprinting. As a result, the child might be at higher risk of developing anxiety disorders, for example, even though they have one normal allele. So the example illustrates how epigenetic factors like genomic imprinting can impact the expression of genes associated with psychological conditions, shedding light on the complexity of the nature-nurture interplay in mental health. Next is the chromosomal abnormalities in psychology. So most common chromosomal abnormality, Down syndrome, is a well-known chromosomal abnormality that has implications for psychology. So individuals with Down syndrome often face unique cognitive developmental challenges due to the extra copy of chromosome 21 or the trisomy 21. Psychologists study the cognitive and emotional development of individuals with Down syndrome to better understand their needs and provide appropriate support and interventions. Next is sex chromosome disorder. Sex chromosome disorders such as Turner syndrome can have psychological implications as well. Individuals with Turner syndrome may experience specific cognitive and social challenges related to their genetic makeup. So psychologists may work with individuals with sex chromosome disorders to address these challenges and provide psychological support. Next is the causes of chromosomal abnormalities. So understanding the causes of chromosomal abnormalities like errors during meiosis is important in psychological research. So researchers explore the psychological consequences of these genetic errors and how they may impact individuals' cognitive, emotional, and social development. So this knowledge helps psychologists, for example, to develop strategies for early intervention and support for affected individuals in their family. So in the field of psychology, the study of chromosomal abnormalities extend beyond the physical aspect to investigate their psychological and developmental implications. So researchers and psychologists work together to enhance the quality of life and well-being of individuals affected by these conditions. Next, let's discuss the reproductive choices. Reproductive choices are a significant aspect of psychology as they involve decisions related to family planning, genetic considerations, and well-being of prospective parents and children. So here's how procedures mentioned in the context na we try to discuss. So first is the genetic counseling. This is a psychological and emotional support service that assists couples who may be at risk of having children with genetic abnormalities. So psychologists working on genetic counseling help individuals and couples um, track complex decisions about family planning. So they provide emotional support, help with decision making, and address psychological impact of genetic risk, ensuring that these parents make informed choices that align with their preference and values. Next is the prenatal diagnostic methods. So prenatal diagnostic methods such as genetic testing and ultrasound examinations are essential tools in psychology, particularly in the field of developmental psychology. So these methods allow healthcare professionals to assess health and development of fetus during pregnancy. Next is the reproductive technologies. So reproductive technologies like in vitro fertilization or IVF, donor insemination, and surrogate motherhood provide considerations to the parents in terms of their values. So psychologists can explore emotional and ethical aspects of assisted reproduction, helping individuals to navigate their potential risk and fertility treatments and surrogate arrangements in terms of psychological challenges, helping them to navigate their coping strategies for that particular matter. So these professionals also examine the psychological well-being of these mothers to ensure ethical practices. Next is adaptation. So adaptation is a significant psychosocial or psychological decision for parents who are infertile or choose to expand their family through adaptation. Okay. Next, let us discuss some environmental context. So first is ecological systems theory and family function. So these particular aspect, it informs family therapy and interventions aiming to improve family well-being, addressing psychological issues within family unit by means of applying in psychology by viewing individuals as embedded within multiple systems and family being the most immediate influential. So this perspective recognizes that family functioning is dynamic and characterized by various influences, whether the behaviors and interactions of each family member affect one another. Next is socioeconomic status or SES. So it is a crucial concept in psychology, particularly in the field of DevPsych. So psychologists investigate how SES or the socioeconomic status affects family functioning and individual development. Next is the family community connection. So psychologists recognize the importance of family community connections for psychological well-being. So for example, stable, socially cohesive neighborhoods that offer social support and enrichment activities possibly influence individuals, both children and adults. So this is particularly relevant in the field of community psychology, where psychologists work to create supportive environments that enhance psychological health. Next is cultural values. So cultural psychology explores how cultural values and practices influence daily life, including family dynamics and child rearing practices. Next is the collectivistic and the individualistic society. Psychologists examine the impact of societal values on public policies related to children, families, and older adults. So this relates to developmental and social psychology as policies affect individual psychological well-being. Next is understanding the relationship between the heredity and environment in psychology. First is the behavioral genetics. So behavioral genetics is a field of psychology that explores the contribution of both genetic and environmental factors to human traits and abilities. Next is challenges to heritability estimates. So while heritability estimates are useful in understanding genetic component of complex traits, they have limitations and challenges. So critics argue that heritability estimates may not fully capture the complex interplay between genes and the environment. So psychologists in this field continue to refine their methods and consider alternative explanations for development of traits. Next is gene environment interaction. So the concept of gene environment interaction highlights the heredity environment do not act in isolation. So instead, genes environment interact in intricate ways to influence the individual's traits. For example, a person's genetic predisposition for a specific trait may manifest differently depending on their life experiences or environmental exposures. So this concept is crucial in understanding how certain genetic factors may become more or less influential in specific environmental contexts. Next is gene environment correlation and niche picking. So gene environment correlation refers to the idea that individual genetic makeup can influence the environments they are exposed to. So people may seek out or create environments that align with their genetic predispositions. So for instance, a child with genetic talent or music may be more likely to engage in musical activities, so ultimately enhancing their musical ability. So this concept is relevant in developmental psychology, where researchers explore how gene environment correlations contribute to the individual differences. And lastly, the epigenesis. So epigenesis is a concept that emphasizes the dynamic interplay between the heredity and environmental influences at all levels of development. So it recognizes that genes can be switched on or off by environmental factors such as nutrition, stress, or exposure to toxins. So this concept is especially relevant to understanding how environment factors can lead to changes in gene expression, ultimately impacting an individual's development and psychological traits. So let's have an example here. So epigenetic changes have impacted in the development of psychiatric disorders, including depression, for example. So while depression has a genetic component, it is also influenced by environmental stressors or factors. So epigenetic modifications can provide insights into how these factors interact to increase risk of depression. So for example, imagine two identical twins, Alice and Emily, so who share the same genetic code. So they experience similar childhood and family environments, but as adults, their lives took different paths. So Alice faced significant stressors in her workplace and personal life, while Emily had less stressful lifestyle. So over time, The chronic stressors in Alice's lives led to epigenetic changes in her DNA, specifically through DNA methylation and histone modification. So these epigenetic alterations affected the expression of genes associated with the mood regulation and stress response in their brain. So as a result, Alice became more susceptible to depression. In contrast, of course, Emily's lower stress levels did not trigger same epigenetic changes, and she remained resilient to depression. So despite identical genetic backgrounds, so the differences in their epigenetic profiles due to their distinct life experiences led to divergent mental health outcomes. Okay. Next, another example, no? Imagine childhood trauma and DNA methylation in stress-related genes. So imagine two individuals, Sarah and Mark, who both experienced childhood trauma, specifically physical abuse. So while both similar genetic backgrounds, their experiences with trauma led to distinct epigenetic changes in their stress-related genes, so which had lasting psychological effects. Okay. So in this example, DNA methylation played a role in how childhood trauma affected individuals psychologically. So Sarah's greater DNA methylation suppression of stress-related genes contributed to her vulnerability to mood disorders, whereas Mark's milder epigenetic changes allowed him to cope more effectively with psychological impact of trauma. So this demonstrates how epigenetic modifications such as DNA methylation can mediate the relationship between early life experiences and psychological outcomes in adulthood within the field of psychology.